Hello and welcome to Rally Point Wargaming, a video series dedicated to the how, the whats and the whys of assembling your armies in the Warhammer 40k universe. All rules and overall points are accurate at the time this video was posted. Today we have the Sound of Inevitability. Although I started this series with Drukhari because they happened to be released the same weekend, it was only a matter of time until we came around to Space Marines, and they are here in the form of my Iron Hands list, the Fist of Iron. The Iron Hands are known for a couple of things: tough infantry, dreadnoughts and heavy armour. But while this list does primarily feature infantry with a couple of dreadnoughts, there are no heavy tanks of any kind. It also has a nice mix of old school Marines as well as the new hotness that is Primaris, and it will be made up of a single battalion using the Space Marine Codex along with the Iron Hands supplement. The primary benefits for playing Iron Hands, other than access to their unique stratagems, relics and traits, is their chapter tactic, which in a pure Iron Hands detachment gives every model a chance to ignore any wounds they take after failing their saving throws on a 6+. This is an effect commonly referred to by old school players as Feel No Pain, as it's what rules of this nature used to be called. On top of this, any units whose stat lines degrade, depending on the damage they've taken, count as double their wounds when working out which stat bracket they're in, which will be relevant in this list. On top of this, Space Marines also get an additional bonus known as Doctrines, if their entire army remains pure Space Marines. The Imperium faction is the largest in the game, with multiple forces able to be deployed together, commonly known as souping, but this provides an incentive to run only Space Marines, and adds a +1 AP bonus to certain weapons based on which of the three doctrines is in effect, either Devastator, Tactical, or Assault. On top of this, they also have what are commonly referred to as super doctrines. So if your entire army isn't just Space Marines, but also purely Iron Hands, they get even more bonuses. In this case, Iron Hands gain an ability that allows them to ignore the penalty for moving and firing heavy weapons, and also gain a reroll 1s to hit for heavy weapons, but only while the Devastator doctrine is in effect. And that's it. No more special rules. Well, unless you count Angels of Death, and yeah, Space Marines get a lot. So starting with the HQ units, we begin with the Captain, upgraded to a Chapter Master. Specifically, he is the new Captain with Mastercrafted Heavy Bolt Rifle that was released along with the new Heavy Intercessors. He's wearing Gravis armour, meaning he has a Toughness 5 as standard, the 4+ Invulnerable that all Captains get, and, as is his title, his Heavy Bolt Rifle is Mastercrafted, meaning he has a decent range shot, as well as his Power Sword also being Mastercrafted, pumping him up to 2 damage per attack in melee. Finally, he has the Chapter Master only relic, Angel Artifice, that increases his armor save and buffs his wounds and toughness, meaning that he has 8 toughness 6 wounds behind a 2+ armor save, a 4+ invulnerable save, and the 6+ Feel No Pain effect of being an Iron Hand. He will also be my Warlord with the Warlord trait Master of the Codex. This is a Chapter Master specific trait, and means that each turn during the command phase I roll a dice and gain a command point on a 4+. There are less passive traits I could have taken, but he's being used mostly in a supporting role, and the list can be a little bit command point heavy. Truth be told, this is the ability that tipped me over the edge to actually taking him as a Chapter Master in the first place, as he could quite easily perform the rest of the role in my army as a standard captain. Next we have the named character of the Iron Hands, Ironfather Pharos, a tech marine that I'll be using rather unusually as he won't really be dealing with any vehicles. Despite being a tech marine, the only ability he has that actually benefits vehicles is the ability to repair them, but he's far more beneficial to infantry models as he grants any infantry unit within 6 inches a 5+ invulnerable save. He can also bestow +1 to ranged hit rolls on a unit within 3 inches, and he himself has some pretty strong defences with 7 toughness 5 wounds, a 2+ armor save, his 5+ invulnerable that he grants, and an improved 5+ Feel No Pain for himself. His special heavy bolter, power axe and servo arms also mean he's a pretty capable threat in his own right too. To finish off the HQ slot we have the Primaris Librarian, a Psyker capable of casting psychic powers and denying those cast by my opponents. The powers that I've chosen for him are Psychic Fortress that projects a 5+ invulnerable save to units within 6 inches of him. Now this doesn't have the same limitation as Pharos' ability, as this doesn't just target infantry. He's also got Null Zone, which is the opposite. turning off invulnerable saves of any opposing units within 6 inches. The troops is where the biggest experiment of this list sits. A full unit of 10 heavy intercessors, carrying executor bolt rifles and executor heavy bolt rifles. These are the heavy variants of the weapons available to the heavy intercessors. They've got long range, but a reduced number of shots traded for increased AP and damage with each shot that lands. These intercessors are also equipped with Gravis armor, so again, tougher than regular marines, and they also have an extra wound at 3 base. Pharos will be used here to grant them the 5+ invulnerable save and the +1 to hit buff, which means that along with the Chapter Master's rerolls, they are usually hitting on 2+ and rerolling 1s, and at worst, he allows them to move freely and negate their -1 to hit if they are no longer in the Devastator Doctrine. Essentially, they're going to form a bit of an old-fashioned Death Star, moving up the board to sit on a mid-table objective and dare something to come and try and remove them. The other troops are a pair of 5-man Incursor squads that I took mostly because of their ability to deploy anywhere on the board, so long as they aren't within 9 inches of enemy units, or their deployment zone, what we used to call infiltrate, which basically means they can make early grabs for objectives, or be used to screen out faster armies that are going to want to rush my lines without giving me a chance to shoot back. They do also have guns that can ignore cover, which is useful, and have a basic melee attack that has -1 AP, which isn't too common for free. The elite section of this list is a pretty busy one, and we start to get heavy with a pair of Redemptor Dreadnoughts. Identically equipped, I've opted for the Macro Plasma Incinerator as their primary weapons, which has the higher range, strength, damage and AP over the Heavy Onslaught Cannon, but the only downside is the random D6 for the number of shots. But it is a blast weapon, so firing into larger mobs can mitigate that. It does also have a whole slew of firepower that will ruin the day of most light infantry units to complement that main gun, and should it reach combat, it has a monstrous strength 14 D3+3 damage power fist. Defensively, they're a toughness 7 vehicle with 13 wounds to chew through, and all dreadnoughts have recently gained the Duty Eternal special rule. This means that when they take damage, you actually reduce the damage done by 1. Damage 2 weapons only do 1, damage 6 weapons only do 5. Now obviously this is to a minimum of 1, unfortunately you can't negate it completely. Of course, as Iron Hands they also get the 6+ Feel No Pain, and as they're the only models in my list that have a degrading stat line, they count as double wounds when calculating their bracket. This is also where I'm planning on running the Librarian, hopefully projecting that 5+ invulnerable save onto these monsters. Next we have a pair of characters. First a Primaris Apothecary, upgraded to a Chief Apothecary, who will also be part of the Heavy Intercessor Death Star. The main reason is for the Combat Restoratives ability, essentially an automatic heal for a unit within 3 inches, and while it normally returns D3 wounds to a model, his Selfless Healer Warlord trait means that it's always a full 3 wounds healed. Normally he can only do this once per turn, but because of his Chief Apothecary upgrade, he can actually do it twice, which means he can also counter armies that try to snipe out the characters, or in late games when the melee is on, by returning wounds to himself, the Chapter Master or Pharos. Apothecaries also have access to a stratagem for 1 command point that revives a killed model from a unit, restoring it to full wounds, which is an amazing ability for a tough unit with high wound counts, i.e. my heavy intercessors. And his Warlord trait also has a secondary ability that makes this stratagem free. Now, you may be looking at the next choice and thinking, wait, you said characters, that's a Dreadnought. And we're both right, because that's how Iron Hands do. They have a stratagem, March of the Ancients, that allows you to nominate a Dreadnought, increase its attacks and leadership by 1, and make it a character, meaning it has all the character benefits, such as restrictions to being targeted at range. It can heroically intervene, and although it can't be equipped with relics or be your Warlord, it can take a Warlord trait with the use of another stratagem. In this case, I've given it Rites of Battle. This means that any core or character units, including itself within 6 inches, gains the Objective Secured ability. Now this one is up for debate as there are a lot of very good Warlord traits available to it, and single models with Objective Secured won't counter big troop units, but it may come in useful. There are also a lot of options for which Dreadnought to go with. Some would say ranged Venerable Dreadnoughts or Relic Contemptor Dreadnoughts from Forge World, as being untargetable with las cannons is just as amazing as it sounds. I've always had a soft spot for the Ironclad, being the only Toughness 8 Dreadnought and 8 wounds along with Duty Eternal, Add to that another monstrous melee profile that deals 2d3 damage, or just a straight 6 if it's fighting a vehicle, and the heavy flamers for softening up infantry, not to mention the assault launchers, which means it can cause mortal wounds when it charges. It's far more effective than a lot of people will give it credit. Its role will be to run with the Redemptors. For one more command point, there is another stratagem that allows it to have the same reroll 1's aura as the Captain, and making those Redemptors objectives secured could also be quite useful, as well as getting that same 5+ invulnerable save from the Librarian. The last choice in the elite slots isn't actually an Iron Hands unit. I'm taking a Calidus Assassin, and the reason it can be here without screwing everything up is due to a special rule granted in a supplement called Psychic Awakening War of the Spider, which is where you can find all the assassin rules. As I mentioned earlier, Space Marines do get multiple abilities providing they keep their armies and detachments pure. However, the Assassins, and other units such as Inquisitors and their retinues, have the Agents of the Imperium special rule. This allows you to add an Agent of the Imperium to your army, providing that your Warlord has the Imperium keyword. The agent won't benefit from any abilities such as detachment doctrines, chapter tactics, or any other buff, but neither does it negate them. Now, I will be honest, I really like the Assassins. The Calidus especially, and chances are there will be one present in almost every Imperium list that I write, at the very least the ones that I plan on playing myself. The Calidus especially is a great disruption tool, with an ability that means you can potentially increase the cost of your opponent's stratagems in turn 1, and possibly turn 2 as well if you decide to spend command points of your own. This can make your opponents really hesitant to use their stratagems early, or really hurt Alpha Strike lists that really want to spend everything to wipe you out from the board in 1 or 2 turns. She's also a very effective support character killer. Although she's only strength 4, she gets 5 attacks with her main weapon, an AP3 2 damage sword that ignores invulnerable saves, a bonus attack with a 3+ poison weapon, and a pistol that instead of wounding normally can inflict D3 mortal wounds. She's also got a deep strike ability, which is a term players use for any ability that allows a unit to start the game off the board and enter as the game progresses. This can let her appear incredibly close to the enemy, ideal for charging her perfect target. Now, as you may have guessed, the Calidus is my favourite assassin, and I feel the most flexible all-around choice, but there are others. If you find yourself in tournament play or some other scenario where your list is fixed and think she may not be the best choice for that particular matchup, then the stratagem Shadow Assignment can be used for 2 command points, which allows you to swap her out for one of the other 3. The final element of the list comes in the form of heavy support, 2 Devastator squads. One, armed with grav cannons, which have fallen a little out of favour, but are designed to shred infantry and even increase their damage from 1 to 2 if their target is wearing anything better than a 3+ armour save. The other squad is armed with the new and improved multi-melters and, because I had spare points, a combi melter on the sergeant for maximum tank destruction. Both squads have an Armorium Cherub, which can be spent to allow one model to shoot again once the squad has finished firing, and the sergeants each have the Signum rule, meaning that once per turn they can declare one of their models will have a ballistic skill of 2+ instead of the usual 3, which is really handy to combine with the Cherub. Devastators themselves have become a little less popular with the advancement of things like Primaris Eradicators, but there is one thing that they can do that even the Primaris can't. And that is go in a drop pod. Another out of favour unit simply because once it arrives it doesn't really do much. It just kind of sits there shooting a single Stormbolter and is generally an easy kill for opponents, but it is a key component in a potentially devastating Alpha Strike, able to deploy the full force of those Devastator squads in exactly the right place. Drop pods have a special rule called Drop Pod Assault, which means that, to my memory, they are the only unit in the game that can freely deep strike, along with anything they're carrying, on turn 1. Every other unit in the game has restrictions until turn 2, and considering it has a transport capacity of 10, it can take both Devastator units and deploy them at the same time. Now, this is an old tactic that a lot of competitive players have already moved on from, and I'll admit it's definitely one of those tactics that can backfire with some bad rolls, but if any chapter can pull it off, then the Iron Hands seem to be the ones to do it. As mentioned earlier, their Super Doctrine, which applies in turn 1 during the Devastator Doctrine, means that they can disembark, and not suffer any negative hit modifiers for moving, and get that built-in reroll of ones to hit with those heavy weapons. Add in stratagems such as Mercy's weakness, which means that unmodified 6+s to wound count as 2 wounds on high output weapons like grav cannons, or optimal repulsion doctrines, meaning that during the inevitable counterattack they can fire Overwatch and hit on a 4+. I think that with some clever positioning, they can be a real threat that can't be ignored. So here's the army in its entirety. It comes in once again at 2,000 points on the nose, and you start the game with 9 command points as 3 have been spent. In this case, 1 to make the Ironclad a character, and 2 to give it and the Apothecary a Warlord trait each. As I said earlier, the Warlord trait on the Ironclad is still up for debate. There are a number of different options, from increasing his Feel No Pain save, giving him more attacks, better buffs that he gives out to units around him, various things like that. I think the objective secured aura will work for testing though, and we'll see how it goes from there. The Intercessors may seem a little bit of a liability to a lot of players that like to keep their troop options cheap, and there are a lot of units now that can do a similar sort of job. Units like Death Guard Terminators or Dark Angel Deathwing, a number of very, very tough units. But the Intercessors are at least a touch cheaper, their firepower isn't bad, and they are at least core troop units with objectives secured. But that will do it once again, so please feel free to share your opinion of this list with me in the comments, or if you're so inclined to playtest it yourself, the only thing I ask is that you let me know how you got on. And finally, if you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will see you once again next time at the Rally Point.